Join us and unwind with a good book. Welcome to Relaxing Reads.
Welcome. Yes, I'm Anne from The Breeze in New Glasgow.
I'm Simone from Breeze Afternoons in Vancouver and Edmonton.
And I'm Deb from The Breeze Halifax.
And this month's book was Astra, the first novel by Cedar Bowers from British Columbia. And she weaves together a fictional story about Astra Brine, who was born and raised on a remote commune in BC and has long struggled to find her way in the world, her life becoming a study of the thin line between dependence and love, need and desire. Over the years, as her path intersects with others, sometimes briefly but always intensely, she will encounter people who, by turns, want to rescue, control, become, and escape her, revealing difficult yet shining truths about who they are and what they yearn for. So first of all, before we get into our book club discussion, just a general, what did you think of the book? And I'll start with you, Simone.
Well, at first when, I kind of read the description of it, and it was about this woman who will have her story shared from 10 different people through the course of these decades, I was like, how is this going to work? I'm really confused. But when I started reading it, I think that's what kept me moving through the chapters. First, I was like, okay, do I need to remember these people? Is this going to go in chronological order, or is it going to jump from different ages in her life? But it kept moving, and every time I scanned ahead, and it was nice that the people sharing their perspectives were the name of the chapter. So I would kind of scan ahead to see who else we're going to hear from and what else is going to be shared. And I also thought she had some kind of a deep, dark secret or something that we were going to find out about. So that's what definitely kept it moving for me, is just it was a good read and I thoroughly enjoyed it.
What about you, Deb?
Yeah, I have to agree. Initially, I wasn't quite sure if I would be able to follow along because I'm easily confused at times. But no, I quite enjoyed it as well. And I thought it's really cool the way it was done. Just like, if we were to look back at, some of the folks that we've run into or have known in our own lifetime, we meet so many people, and sometimes, they stay for a while, sometimes not so much. So it was really cool to see where they, fit into her life.
My only complaint about this book is that I read it so quickly because I enjoyed it so much. And we had received this book a number of months ago. So I sort of read it early on thinking it was the next month's book. So I got ahead of everybody. It's been a while since I finished the book, and I just remember that I read it in a weekend and I absolutely loved it. So we will be speaking to the author, Cedar, in just a little bit, but let's dive in. Astra is the story of a woman as revealed through the perspective of 10 people she meets over the course of her life. It's a really cool structure. How did this structure add to or complicate your understanding of who Astra is during your reading? Deb, what do you think about that one?
Well, as mentioned, initially I think it was a little confusing for me, but I think we learn more about the characters around her and, get to learn about who she was, why she was the way she was at certain times in her life. And I think we got to appreciate her, for me anyway, I got to appreciate knowing her through others at different stages and understanding just a little bit more about who she was, when she was a child, what was happening in her life, how did she become this character and move on into a different stage in her, just like I think a lot of us. So yeah, I did, appreciate where they were able to go in different stages.
And Simone, what did you think?
Same thing for me. I think just as every chapter advanced, you kind of learned a little bit more. And it was so interesting because it was like you find how these people connected to her at what point in her life. And then there was always a moment where they felt some way about her, or like very strong feelings, or didn't like her. And then they had a soft spot for her. And I think it just makes you think about your own life, and you think, well, what do people think about me? Because we have obviously our own ideas of who we are. And then the people you've spent time with or maybe lost touch with, you're like, was there something I did? Or how do people really feel about me? And so I think them expressing the feelings they had about her, whether they were negative, but then there was always something that pulled them back to her where they at the end of it were okay with her, or wanted to still have a connect with her. So that was interesting. And I think that's what helped as well add to that story as you continued through.
Yeah, I thought it was a really unique way to explore her story. Once I fell into the rhythm of it, I found it to be quite refreshing how each chapter was the name of the person and their perspective, and it was almost like a new little mini story inside of the main story. And then there was always this mystery around Astra and her character development. So it was a really unique novel for sure, and I really enjoyed it. There are many different parent-child relationships portrayed in Astra. What did you take away from the book about what is passed down from parent to child? And Simone, we'll start with you on this one. As a parent, how did you feel going through those various stories?
Well, I think as a parent, you're always trying to do the best you can for your children, and you can look back later in life and maybe you think it wasn't enough or you weren't good enough. But when you're in that moment, you're trying to provide for them, be there for them the best you can or the best you're capable of. And sometimes people have been raised a certain way that they can't give all of themselves to someone. And I think that was the case with her dad, Raymond. We didn't get a lot on his backstory as much, but he obviously had his reasons for how he was, and you could tell she kind of always needed a little bit more from him, and she couldn't get it. So I think when she had her son, and we hear holding hands and being close, and her just trying to keep him in these fancy homes, not in a commune, or just connecting with people where she could kind of give what she thought was a better life to him, I think that's how she was kind of making up for it, or filling that void she had, not having a mother and not being close with her father and being around some of her father's friends. So I think she kind of just always was lost. And when she finally had her son, it was a way for her to just have him and be together and try how she wanted to parent. So I thought that was kind of interesting because, she jumped around a lot, but at the end of it, I think she was just doing the best she could. And sometimes people thought maybe she wasn't the best mother. But like I said, as a parent, you try your best. You do what you can do.
And Deb, what did you take away from the parent-child relationships in the story?
Simone and other parents out there, I always like to, send out the love and respect and a big, high five to you, because parenting, no matter who you are, no matter how well you've done in your life, in your circles, it is tough, isn't it? It's really difficult, no matter what means you might have around you or what you're surrounded with, especially if it was part of the plan to have children. If you kind of came into it and it's like, oh, now, how does this work? How will it affect us? How will it affect me? And sometimes it's a learn as you go with, I think, some of the characters in this book as we learn about them. So I always have a lot of respect, and I think that sometimes, with some of the characters, I thought, I've tried to step in and throw some advice, even as a non-parent, but I'm an aunt, I'm a friend, and I've babysat. I should be able to offer you something, but nobody really knows until you're in that situation how to handle it. And like the book of life, it doesn't really exist. There's no manual. So it's kind of a day to day. So I liked the relationships. I like the different dynamics with the parents and the children and how they kind of, went about whatever it was that they had to go about doing.
And it started right from the beginning with Astra, her dad, Raymond, and that really set the tone and the trajectory for Astra as a child and how she handled parenthood as well. And it was really interesting seeing her story as told from the various perspectives on how she was as a mother, especially Doris's perspective, which I thought was quite interesting. But you're right, Deb. I have all the praise in the world for parents out there, and this was just an interesting way to explore those parent-child relationships in this novel. Now, in the epilogue, we hear from Astra herself. What was it like to finally be able to hear Astra's voice? Was there anything about it that surprised you? Simone, we'll start with you.
Well, it surprised me that now I'm assuming, was she in her 60s when we hear from her? It's that she's in that point of her life where things have really calmed down for her and things have come full circle, which I really liked. Like now she's back living on the commune and she's going to do the things she wants to do with it, and how different the life there was when she first lived there to now how this can be her happy place. And I was wondering if she would share a little bit more about why there were certain things she did. We didn't hear too much of that, but there's this part where she talks about life on the commune now, and she says, "This is what it's like here now. The region is growing. No one wants to be in the city anymore with its hot pavement, endless pandemics, and the increasing cost of housing. People want to simplify, to grow their food, to know their neighbors. Most want to just sit outside in the open air and breathe without anxiety buzzing all around them like clouds of black flies in May." And so she says, during her time here, she's starting to wonder if that's the same feeling she has. And she jumped around from city to city. She seemed like she was so lost, and it was like she finally found her way. And then the moments at the end with her father, like that's where it kind of, struck a chord with me, because I was finally like, okay, this is her life. It was chaotic. It was hectic. She's this young mother going from place to place. And now here she is. She's near the end. She's met this wonderful man, and maybe something's going to happen. And she's ready to just live her life in peace and just right back to her grandchildren when she wants to, if she has time. But she finally has come to a place where she seems content. And I was really happy to hear that from her.
It almost felt like a full circle moment at the end, didn't it? For sure.
Yes, yes.
And Deb, what do you think?
Yeah, I agree. And, what we heard from her, or what we learned with her father, I think she's like a lot of people, that many people we know. Life throws a lot at you. You deal as best you can with the best of what you know in each particular moment in your life. And I think she wanted to love or find a little bit of love with her father, whatever that definition may have been for her or for him. So it was quite interesting, at that stage in her life, at that stage in his life. But I also thought it was like meeting a long lost friend, or someone, I guess, in recent times, meeting someone that you've known through social media interactions, and then finally get to meet them in person and think, yes, this is why somehow I've connected to you, just like some of the other people in her life connected, maybe should have disconnected, but kept coming back. There was something that was drawing them to her. That's kind of how I felt when we heard from her.
Yes, for sure. And it was, I was expecting, as you were saying, this mystery, you're waiting for something to sort of happen. But in a way, the sort of calm of it all was the perfect ending to this book, because she'd been through so much, and having it end like that, I always like a nice happy ending. And although it was sort of sad with her dad, it still felt like she was where she was meant to be. What does Astra tell us about the idea of the real self? Do you think we ever see a real version of Astra? And how did your own perception of her change over the course of the book? Simone?
Well, I think the idea of the real self, you start to think about yourself and your relationships. And what it made me think of is people come into your life for a reason, a season, or a lifetime, right? So it's you go through and you think about the connections you've had and how certain people have made an impact in your life. And hopefully you've made some kind of an impact in their life. That's kind of just it. It's just about being real, being authentic. You might not be everybody's cup of tea, but you do what you do and you go through life. And I think that's what it was. And my perception changed because, you heard from all these characters who had all these opinions of her, but it wasn't till the end where we got to know her and got to appreciate and love her. So there was always a point where maybe some people didn't have the best things to say about her, but they always kind of felt for her. But when you got to the end, you're like, hey, you know what? She's actually great. She's strong. She's a great thinker, especially those moments where she thought she should get in the water, but she thought in that time that no, she couldn't go in there because then they're both going to be in trouble. So thought that she kind of didn't have the tools she needed to grow up, but she found them along the way. And I think that's how we all kind of just go through life. And so my perception of her was just that it took her a while to get to where she needed, but I was happy that she finally got there.
Yeah, well said. And Deb, what do you think?
Yeah, I think she was She was just like one of your best friends. You know, there was quirkiness and weird times. You love them like crazy. They drive you crazy, especially, you know, when we get to, first meet them or meet her and her younger friend. But you can't help not wanting to be a part of their life, no matter how complicated it could be at times. And I think we all change, don't we? Sometimes we become different people after each stage in our life. I look at each decade and think, I couldn't go back to that person. I don't think. I don't know if I could be that person. Am I still that person? Is there a little bit of me in there? And hopefully we become better versions of ourselves over time. And yeah, I think she certainly did. And an interesting character for sure.
Yeah, for sure. And I echo what you both say about her. And I just found she took on the characteristics of the various people she encountered over the years. As I think that we do when we're around certain people, we may start acting like them or picking up their habits. And as she lived and moved through her life, she seemed to really come to her own. So at the end, it felt like that was Astra. But through it all, she sort of was just trying to figure out who she was. So it was quite a journey to be on, and a really interesting journey as well as the way that the novel was presented. And actually, on that note, we are going to catch up with the novelist, Cedar Bowers. It's actually her first novel, so this is really exciting to talk to her today.
Hello?
This is Anne, Deb, and Simone from the Breeze Book Club.
Hello. So wonderful to talk to you all.
So Cedar, is this your first interview by three people at once?
Yes, absolutely.
Yes.
I'm very new to
very
this.
Good.
This is going to be great.
Very good. All right. Well, we're excited to do this. So let's get started. First of all, congratulations on your debut novel. It's wonderful. We all loved it.
Thank you so much. Thank you. That really means a lot.
Now, it's not a typical coming-of-age story, so what inspired you to present Astra's story through the perspective of 10 different characters? It was so cool.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, well, I started to write a little bit later in life, and so I started with one short story, and while writing that one, I got the idea. I've always been fascinated by the idea that there could be a book written about everybody. Everybody on the planet could have a novel about them, but it's who would tell the story. So I like the idea of if you picked a person and you found a random assortment of people to talk about them, you would have something really important to say about them, and you would get to know them in a really unique way. So it was with this idea in mind that I wanted to look at one person through the eyes of 10 others. I also grew up in a really small town, and anybody who's grown up in a small town sort of knows that talking about other people is like a big part of what happens. Like, you know your neighbor through stories better than you know them in person. So I wanted to also explore that idea of like judgment and watching others and talking about others and what that does to the person that's being talked about, what that does to the people who are thinking about them. So it was with those two ideas in mind that I came up with the concept for the structure.
Well, I come from a small town, so I can appreciate that. And I think that's why I dove into this book. And I seriously, Cedar, I read it in one weekend. I could not put it down. I loved it so much. Again, congratulations. I'm going to hand things over to Simone. She's got a couple of questions for you as well.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah, Cedar, well, what you just kind of touched on right there, you know, when writing this book, was the idea to kind of challenge the notion that some of us do give too much importance to what others think about us?
Yes, 100%. When I started writing Astra, I had actually just moved back to my small town for a few years, and I just had my second child. And, you know, anybody who's become a parent or had a big change in their life, often it's like when you're suddenly thrust into adulthood, and you have to sort of make some changes. You need to try to figure out how you're going to move forward. How are you going to be an adult? How are you going to be a parent? And one of those things I think a lot of us have to do is push aside the stories that have been told about ourselves. And so I was sort of undergoing this myself while I was writing. I spent far too much time thinking about what other people thought of me as a girl or as a teenager or in my early 20s even. And I wanted to start writing, and so that was another big change I was going through. And the only way I was able to sort of get the courage was to stop thinking about what other people thought about me. I had to throw some of that away so that I could move forward and I could try new things and pay more attention to my children than to thinking about how I was affecting other people. And I think that's a pretty common change. It's sort of just another step into adulthood. I mean, a lot of people joke about it happening for women at age 40, which I now am. And so I feel like I've gone through another phase of that, of being like, okay, I'm just going to go forward in my life. And yeah, so I was going through that while I wrote Astra too.
It's so interesting you say that because I can relate to that because same thing, I just turned 40 last year and there was a bit of anxiety leading up to it. But I think once you hit that number, you just think, hey, you know what? Look at where I am. Look at what I've done so far in life. And you start to care less what people think and you just start living, whether that's, what you're doing in life, your body, everything. You just start to say, you know what, I'm not that 20-year-old girl. This is who I am. So I really, appreciate that part of it as well. And just with Astra's journey, just kind of seeing where she got to in the end and that confidence in her. I really like that. Hearing what you just said, is there a part of Astra you connected with while writing this book? Like, was there a certain moment in her life that was you more sharing a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, I kind of think about Astra as being about 5% of me. So she's not me at all. We didn't have the same experiences growing up, but I grew up as well in a pretty alternative community. And my parents were pretty on the fringe and pretty activist and very political. And we lived in a very small town where there was lots of back-to-the-landers. So even though I didn't have Astra's childhood, I didn't live somewhere so remote. I had two parents instead of one. I did have a good window into that sort of upbringing with the people around me and even with myself. So that part we share a little bit in common. And then also, I put her through a bit of a similar geographical journey. So when I left home, I also moved to Calgary and got a job in a men's store in a mall. So I just loved writing about that culture shock that I had, because I grew up pre-internet, really. And so moving to a mall and where there's fashion and there's, all sorts of people that I'd not grown up around, was a major culture shock. So I got to explore that a little bit with Astra as well, and that was really, really fun. But yeah, and then the other thing I would say is I'm a little bit of a late bloomer, like Astra is. So she's constantly reinventing herself. She's trying to figure out her place in the world and her place, who she thinks she is. And, I did start writing later, and I kind of feel like I took my time as well.
I really enjoyed just learning all the different ways about her and her reinventing herself. But like I said, I really liked where she got to in the end. And at first, Celestial seemed like, not such a great place to be with the experiences she had there growing up as a child. But it was so nice to see her go back there in the end to kind of feel that peace and kind of make it her own. And obviously it was a different vibe to it because you got rid of some of the other people that were there and stuff like that. Have you dreamt up where your Celestial will be later in life, like the place where you kind of want to end up?
I love this question. I think I spend a little bit too much time thinking about retirement, and maybe everybody does this, where I'm like, I know time moves faster all the time. I don't know why I seem to think that once I'm 60 or 70, I'm going to have all the time in the world to reread all the novels and rewatch all the great TV series and digitize my photos. But I do think about retirement a lot. I should probably live in the present a little bit more. But yeah, I feel like Celestial, you're right, it was not an ideal place to grow up. But then again, I don't know if any place is completely perfect to grow up. So I feel like everybody has this experience of needing to challenge where they came from at a certain point. And for some of us, that means leaving for a period of time to kind of compare where you grew up with the wider world. But then often people circle back and they start to value the things or the place that they came from, or they want to reconnect with their old community. And so Astra does do that with Celestial, and I'm sort of undergoing a similar process now. As I said, when my kids were small, I returned home after 15 years for a few years, and now I live nearby, and I try to spend as much time in my home community as I can, and I definitely plan on retiring there. So I do think I will, my hometown is also my Celestial.
I love that. And also, getting to the end, my last question here is, have you thought about a sequel for this book? Because I kind of want to know what's going to happen with Astra and Justin here.
I know. I really have high hopes for them. I really want things to work out. I don't know. They seem like the perfect pair of friendship or relationship. I love that. But I don't. I don't have any plans for a sequel. I feel like, though some different people in book clubs have said they wish there was novels about the different characters or to see one person more carry on. I do love it when novelists do that, when couple books that explore one town or explore one family. I don't think I'll be doing that with Astra, but maybe with another book in the future.
Oh, very cool. Thanks so much. Again, I love the book. I blew through it as well, like Anne did. Such a good read. And so thank you again. I'll pass you over to Deb.
Thank you for reading.
Yeah, Cedar, and I feel just like Anne and Simone, I loved it and went through it very quickly and had only wished that I had gone through it even sooner than I did. And it was wonderful. And I know we've already touched on, what others think of us, but I think it's so interesting, maybe a reflection on ourselves, I guess, as we go through reading this book and reading about Astra. People always tell us what people think of you really is none of your business, but some of us struggle with it. And I think, we wonder because we're curious. But so was it your intention to actually maybe allow us all to understand how Astra is perceived by others could be a lesson in truly understanding parts of our own character? Because sometimes we don't understand how people look at us and how that might affect us if we change things, or you talking about where you've landed now and where you're living, and you look at your home differently, if you go away for a while and you come back and you see things that weren't there before.
Yeah, I absolutely, yes, 100%. I was thinking about this as I wrote it. I couldn't help but often think, what would Astra do if she found this book in a bookstore and she'd never known it was written and she read it? What would it do to her? And it was something I thought while writing each of the characters. Would she be hurt by some of their descriptions of her? Would she be heartbroken? Would she be angry and feel like, oh, that's not how it went at all? And it was a constant voice where she was having an emotional reaction to what these people were saying about her. Because I wonder, when I say there's a novel that could be written about anybody, I do wonder if I found, and I got to read what somebody really thought about me or how I hurt them at some point, would I change? Like, what would it do to me as a person? And I think there'd be good, and I think there would be bad. Both would be true. But I really liked playing with that idea. And then also, I feel like it is a book a little bit about judgment, and I cringe sometimes with how some people were talking about Astra, and I cringe sometimes about how people in my community talk about others. And I feel like thinking about how you judge somebody or what stories you tell about somebody, no matter how close you are to them, even if you think you know them really, really well, you could be making grave mistakes, and you could be hurting them or harming them by telling those stories. So I just like that idea for people to think about being so judgmental or thinking that they know who somebody truly is when maybe they don't at all.
Yeah, and I think this time in our lives, obviously pandemic, we've had time to pause and reflect. So I think it's a good time to take that reflection and kind of, sit back, take a breather and look at our own lives before, looking at others.
Yes, exactly. I agree.
And this was pre-pandemic, you writing about Astra, but there's a bit of a theme maybe with the names like Astra and Celestial. And, so many of us have been looking for those answers up in the sky, stargazing this past year and looking for the reflection on ourselves and those around us. So do you think that readers can reflect and see change and possibility along with hope?
I hope so. I love this, comparing the pandemic to this cosmos and the stars. You're right that Astra is taught to look at the stars. She's taught to look at the sky or to find answers, and she has this dice that she carries and she rolls around. But one thing that I feel like she learns throughout the course of the novel is that really while staring at the stars or the sky or asking these random questions, and throwing them out there to the universe, she's actually finding those answers for herself. Those things are only a tool. So I think you're right, as we've all been reflecting during the last couple of years and turning to different tools like the stars or whatever we need to make sense of the world right now. We are really doing that work ourselves. We are using the stars as inspiration that kind of blow open your heart and make you be able to ponder life, and you're coming up with your own answers. And so I think Astra is hopeful in that she is reinventing herself. She is trying. She is finding answers within herself, and we're all doing that too at the same time.
Love it.
Well, thank you so much, Cedar. It was lovely talking to you, and thank you for joining our book club on this discussion. And thanks again for your book. We thoroughly all enjoyed it.
Loved it. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you so much for choosing Astra and for chatting with me. It really is just so lovely.
Oh, thank you for your time.
Can't wait for the second novel.
Okay, I'll try.
Okay.
Awesome.
Okay, bye.
Bye,
y'all.
Cedar.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Bye.
So lovely chatting with Cedar, and thank you again for listening today.
Thank you for kicking back and relaxing with us. We hope you'll join us again on Relaxing Reads.